The impossible return. Nathan West's accident exposes Port Charles' greatest nightmare. The quiet streets of Port Charles are about to be shattered by a revelation that will challenge everything the residents believed about life, death, and the sinister forces that have long haunted their community. What begins as a routine traffic accident will spiral into a terrifying discovery that threatens to unravel the very fabric of the town's sense of security. A fateful discovery en route for 115. The evening air hung heavy with an unusual tension as Lulu Spencer made her way down Route 415. What should have been an ordinary drive quickly transformed into something far more extraordinary when she spotted the smoking wreckage of a truck that had veered off the road. The vehicle sat mangled against the guardrail, steam rising from its damaged engine, creating an eerie silhouette against the darkening sky. Without hesitation, Lulu pulled over and dialed 911, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "There's been an accident on Route 415, she reported to the dispatcher, her eyes fixed on the motionless figure trapped behind the wheel. The deployed airbag obscured the victim's face, but something about the scene felt ominous, as if fate itself had orchestrated this moment. When paramedics arrived, they worked with practiced efficiency to extract the unconscious driver from the wreckage. Detective Harrison Chase questioned Lulu about what she had witnessed, but she could only confirm that she had discovered the accident after it occurred. No other vehicles were present, no witnesses to be found. The victim was quickly transported to General Hospital, beginning a chain of events that would rock Port Charles to its core. Shockwaves at General Hospital. The emergency department at General Hospital buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. When the ambulance arrived, Dr. Lucas Jones was attending to his rounds when the paramedics rushed through the doors with their unconscious patient. What should have been another routine trauma case quickly became something unprecedented. When Lucas caught sight of the victim's face, the color drained from Lucas's features as recognition dawned. Anna Devane and Dante Falconeri, who had arrived at the hospital to check on Drew Kane, noticed Lucas's stunned expression and approached to investigate. The three stood in collective shock as they stared at the unconscious man on the gurney. It was Nathan West, the same Nathan West who had died in Anna's arms 7 years ago, after being shot by his father, Caesar Faison. The same Nathan who had been buried with full police honors, mourned by his wife Maxie and the entire Port Charles Police Department. Yet here he was, very much alive, breathing, and in need of immediate medical attention. Anna's mind raced as she processed the impossible sight before her. Dante stood frozen, memories flooding back of his former colleague and friend who had been taken from them too soon. The implications of Nathan's survival were staggering. If Nathan was alive, what else had they believed to be true that might be false? A pattern of impossible returns. For Anna Devane, Nathan's miraculous appearance was particularly unsettling because it followed another shocking resurrection that had already shaken Port Charles to its foundation. Just weeks earlier, Dr. Britt Westburn had returned from the dead, stunning her mother Liesl Obrecht and everyone who had witnessed her apparent demise at the hands of Heather Weber's poisoned hook. Anna had been struggling to process Britt's return, knowing that the brilliant doctor had died in her mother's arms after being stabbed with the hook killer's weapon. The medical examiner had confirmed her death, funeral arrangements had been made, and the community had mourned her loss. Yet Britt had walked back into Port Charles as if death itself was merely an inconvenience. Now, with Nathan's equally impossible return, Anna began to see a disturbing pattern emerging. These weren't random miracles, they were connected, part of a larger scheme that could only have been orchestrated by someone with extraordinary resources and a complete disregard for the emotional devastation their deceptions would cause. As Anna stood in the hospital corridor, watching the medical team work to stabilize Nathan, a terrifying possibility began to take shape in her mind. There was only one person who possessed both the motivation and the capabilities to stage such elaborate deceptions: Caesar Faison, Nathan and Britt's father. The nightmare Faison scenario. The thought of Faison being alive sent chills through Anna's core. For decades, Caesar Faison had been her most persistent and dangerous adversary, a man whose obsession with her had driven him to commit unspeakable acts. She had watched him die multiple times, only to see him return again and again, each resurrection more sinister than the last. The WSB had confirmed Faison's death in 2018 when Jason Morgan shot him. Anna herself had been present when Kevin Collins removed Faison's brain for study, placing it in a jar on his desk as the ultimate proof that the supervillain was truly gone. Yet if anyone could find a way to cheat death once more, it would be Caesar Faison. Anna's fear wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Faison's obsession with her had destroyed countless lives over the years, and his children had been both weapons and victims in his twisted games. If he was truly alive and pulling the strings behind Nathan and Britt's returns, then no one in Port Charles was safe. The more Anna considered the possibility, the more the pieces seemed to fit together. Who else would have the resources to stage two separate deaths so convincingly? Who else would have the motivation to use his own children as pawns in some greater scheme? And who else would have the twisted psychology to put his family through the trauma of believing their loved ones were dead? A sister's bedside vigil. As Nathan was admitted to the hospital and placed in intensive care, word of his miraculous return began to spread through Port Charles like wildfire. Liesel Obrecht, who had already been reeling from her daughter Britt's unexpected return, received the news that her other child was also alive. The emotional reunion between mother and son would have to wait, however. As Nathan remained unconscious from his injuries, Britt Westburn learned of her brother's accident through the hospital grapevine. Despite the complicated relationship they had shared, particularly regarding their father's influence on their lives, she felt compelled to visit Nathan in his hospital room. The siblings had been through so much together, both as victims of Faison's machinations and as reluctant participants in schemes they barely understood. When Britt entered Nathan's hospital room, she found him connected to various monitoring devices, his face bearing the marks of the traffic accident. Despite his unconscious state, he looked remarkably well for someone who was supposed to have been dead for 7 years. As she settled into the chair beside his bed, she couldn't help but wonder what he had endured during the years everyone believed he was gone. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor and the soft hiss of the ventilator. Britt had so many questions, so many things she needed to understand about their shared predicament. How long had Nathan been aware that she was also alive? What role had their father played in their respective deaths and returns? And most importantly, what was Faison planning for them now? Awakening and revelations. After several tense hours, Nathan began to stir, his eyelids fluttering as consciousness slowly returned. Britt leaned forward, her heart pounding as she waited for some sign of recognition. When Nathan's eyes finally opened and focused on her face, she saw a mixture of relief and resignation that told her everything she needed to know. "Sister," Nathan whispered, his voice hoarse from the ventilator tube that had just been removed. "I wondered when you'd find out I was back." Britt felt tears welling in her eyes as she reached for his hand. "Nathan, what happened to us? How long have you known?" Nathan struggled to sit up, wincing from the pain in his ribs. "Too long, Britt. Far too long." His expression darkened as memories flooded back. "I've been conscious for months, but he wouldn't let me come back until now. Not until everything was in place." The pronoun hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. They both knew exactly who Nathan was referring to, even though neither wanted to speak the name aloud. "Father," Britt said finally, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. "He's really alive, isn't he?" Nathan nodded grimly. "Very much so. And he's been pulling our strings this entire time, watching us, controlling us, using us for whatever sick game he's playing now." The father's control. As the conversation continued, the full scope of Faison's manipulation began to emerge. Nathan revealed that his death had been staged, orchestrated by Faison himself to remove his son from Port Charles, while he implemented a larger plan. The shooting had been real, and Onathan bore the scars to prove it. That medical intervention arranged by Faison had saved his life even as everyone else believed he was dying. "He kept me in a private facility," Nathan explained, his voice filled with resentment. "Told me it was for my own protection, that there were forces in Port Charles that would kill me if they knew I was alive. But I knew better. He was keeping me prisoner until he needed me." Britt listened in horror as Nathan described years of captivity disguised as medical care. Faison had used a combination of psychological manipulation and genuine concern for Nathan's safety to keep him compliant. There had been genuine threats to Nathan's life, enemies of Faison who would have used his son as leverage, but the confinement had served Faison's purposes as well. The same pattern had been repeated with Britt, though her circumstances had been different. Her staged death at the hands of Heather Weber's poisoned hook had been real enough, but Faison's medical resources had included antidotes and treatments that official channels didn't know existed. She had been taken to the same private facility where Nathan had been held, though their paths had been kept deliberately separate. "He told me you were really dead," Nathan said, anger creeping into his voice. "Let me believe I was the only one who had survived. It wasn't until a few weeks ago that I learned you were alive too." A father's twisted mission. The siblings began to piece together the scope of their father's plan. Faison hadn't simply faked their deaths for sentimental reasons. He had been preparing them for a specific mission, one that required them to return to Port Charles at precisely the right moment. Their years in captivity hadn't just been confinement, they had been training. Nathan had been subjected to psychological conditioning, his memories of Port Charles carefully manipulated to serve Faison's agenda. He retained his love for Maxie and his loyalty to his friends, but now those emotions were complicated by years of isolation and indoctrination. Faison had convinced him that the only way to truly protect the people he loved was to serve his father's interests. Britt had undergone similar treatment, though her scientific background had made her useful in different ways. Her work at the secret laboratory, analyzing Professor Dalton's research, had been part of Faison's larger scheme to acquire technologies that could give him unprecedented power. Her expertise in genetics and molecular biology made her an invaluable asset, in ways that went far beyond her emotional connections to Port Charles. "The research you've been doing," Nathan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's not just about helping people, is it?" Britt shook her head sadly. "No, Father has plans for it. Terrible plans. But he's made it clear that our compliance isn't optional. Not if we want to keep the people we love safe." The threat was implicit but very real. Faison held leverage over both of his children. Their loved ones in Port Charles remained vulnerable, as long as they defied his wishes. Maxie, James, Liesel, Nina, and countless others could suffer if Nathan and Britt refused to cooperate with their father's schemes. An eavesdropper's horror. Unknown to the siblings, their conversation was being overheard. Anna Devane had been lingering in the hospital corridor, her investigative instincts compelling her to stay close to the inexplicable situation. When she heard voices from Nathan's room, she had positioned herself just outside the door, straining to catch every word. What Anna heard confirmed her worst fears and introduced new terrors she hadn't even considered. Not only was Faison alive, but he had been orchestrating events in Port Charles for years while everyone believed he was dead. The scope of his deception was breathtaking: fake deaths, hidden facilities, psychological manipulation, and long-term planning that stretched far beyond anything she had imagined possible. Anna's blood ran cold as she listened to Nathan and Britt describe their captivity and conditioning. These weren't just to people who had miraculously survived deadly encounters. They were victims of an elaborate psychological experiment conducted by one of the most dangerous men she had ever known. Faison had turned his own children into unwilling agents, using their love for others as leverage to ensure their cooperation. The revelation about Britt's research added another layer of horror to the situation. Whatever Professor Dalton had been working on, Faison clearly saw it as a key component of some larger plan. The combination of advanced scientific research with Faison's unlimited resources and complete lack of moral constraints created possibilities too frightening to fully comprehend. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the implication that this was only the beginning. If Faison was alive and had been planning for years, then Nathan and Britt's returns weren't endpoints. They were opening moves in a game whose scope Anna was only beginning to understand. A more terrifying possibility. As Anna processed everything she had overheard, another horrifying thought began to take shape in her mind. If Faison could fake the deaths of Nathan and Britt so convincingly, if he possessed medical resources advanced enough to reverse what appeared to be fatal injuries, then who else might still be alive? The name that rose unbidden to Anna's consciousness filled her with dread. Peter August, Faison's other son. The one who had brought nothing but destruction and pain to Port Charles before his apparent death. Anna herself had watched Peter die, had seen Felicia Scorpio deliver what should have been a fatal blow to his head. She had remained with him until he drew his last breath, certain that this time, at least, the nightmare was truly over. But if Faison's medical capabilities were advanced enough to save Nathan from a bullet wound, and Britt from a poisoned blade, then Peter's head injury might not have been as fatal as it appeared. The thought of Peter August still being alive, potentially working alongside his father once again, introduced a level of threat that made Anna's previous fears seem trivial by comparison. Peter had been obsessed with Maxie Jones, Nathan's widow, in ways that bordered on pathological. His schemes had endangered numerous innocent people, and his manipulative nature had made him extraordinarily difficult to predict or counter. If he was truly alive and working with Faison, then the danger to Port Charles had just escalated exponentially. Anna found herself trembling as the full implications hit her. A living Faison was terrifying enough, but a Faison armed with advanced medical technology and supported by his 3 children Nathan, Britt, and potentially Peter represented a threat unlike anything Port Charles had ever faced. The community had survived many crises over the years, but they had never confronted an enemy who could literally resurrect the dead and turn them into weapons. The investigation Anna had been conducting into Nathan and Britt's returns had just taken on a new urgency. She needed to uncover the truth about Faison's survival and capabilities before he could implement whatever plan had required such elaborate preparation. The lives of everyone in Port Charles might depend on her ability to expose and counter this threat before it was too late. As Anna slipped away from the hospital corridor, her mind was already racing through the implications and possibilities. The twins' miraculous returns had indeed been omen-harbingers of a nightmare that was only just beginning to unfold, and somewhere in the shadows, she was certain, Caesar Faison was watching and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal himself and claim his terrible victory over the town that had defied him for so long. The accident that had brought Nathan back to Port Charles might have seemed like a stroke of fate, but Anna now understood it was something far more sinister. The opening gambit in a game, whose rules had yet to be revealed and whose stakes might be higher than anyone dared imagine. Next, we will dive into the explosive possibility that Carly Spencer could force Jack Brennan's hand by demanding he fire Jocelyn Jacks from the WSB, potentially as his last shot at preserving their budding romance. In the swirling drama of Port Charles, tensions are mounting as Carly remains blissfully unaware of Brennan's secretive move to enlist Jocelyn in the high-stakes world of the World Security Bureau. This recruitment, shrouded in mystery, places Jocelyn in perilous territory, far beyond the everyday intrigues of the town. Brennan, with his suave demeanor and calculated strategies, saw an opportunity in Jocelyn's vulnerable state, drawing her into missions that could unravel lives in an instant. But secrets in Port Charles have a way of bubbling to the surface, often through unexpected leaks or chance encounters at places like the Metro Court, or even during late-night stakeouts. Imagine Carly stumbling upon a cryptic message or overhearing a hushed conversation between Jason Morgan and the late Britt Westburn's lingering contacts. It's only a matter of time before the truth explodes into the open, shattering Carly's trust in Brennan. Once Carly uncovers this bombshell, her reaction is bound to be nothing short of volcanic. Picture her eyes flashing with fury as she processes how Brennan manipulated Jocelyn's deep-seated grief over the tragic loss of Dex Heller, a wound that's still fresh and raw in Jocelyn's heart. Dex's untimely demise left Jocelyn adrift, searching for purpose amid the chaos, and Brennan cleverly positioned himself as a mentor figure, offering her a path that seemed like justice but reeked of exploitation, adding fuel to the fire. The tangled web involving Cyrus Renault comes into play. Brennan used that volatile situation to bind Jocelyn to him, making her feel an unspoken debt for his interventions. Cyrus, with his shadowy alliances and religious facade, had been pulling strings from behind bars, and Brennan's involvement only deepened the danger. Carly, ever the protective mother bear, will see right through this as a calculated ploy to drag her daughter into a life of espionage, where one wrong move could mean the end. The outrage doesn't stop there. Carly's anger will skyrocket when she learns about the mayhem that unfolded at the luxurious, yet treacherous Five Poppies Resort. This opulent getaway, nestled in a remote locale with its pristine beaches and hidden coves, became the backdrop for a whirlwind of deception and near misses. Jocelyn, under Brennan's directives, has been weaving through lies and covert operations, sneaking into restricted areas and dodging surveillance like a seasoned operative. But these actions haven't gone without consequence. Think narrow escapes from armed guards, or tense interrogations that left her heart pounding. Carly, upon piecing together the full story, perhaps from a frantic call from Jocelyn or a leaked report from WSB insiders, will be horrified at how close her daughter came to disaster. The resort incident might even involve fabricated identities, high-speed chases through winding coastal roads, or alliances with unlikely figures who blurred the lines between friend and foe, all amplifying Carly's sense of betrayal toward Brennan. Faced with this betrayal, Carly isn't one to sit idly by. She's likely to issue a direct command of her own, turning the tables on Brennan in a dramatic confrontation. Stubbornness runs in the family. After all, Jocelyn, mirroring her mother's fierce independence, might dig in her heels and refuse to abandon this new path, seeing it as her way to honor Dex's memory or carve out her own destiny. Undeterred, Carly could corner Brennan in a private moment, perhaps in his sleek office overlooking the harbor or during a tense dinner at Kelly's diner, and lay down the law. "Fire her now, or we're done," she might declare, her voice steady but laced with unspoken pain. This ultimatum would force Brennan to weigh his professional ambitions against the genuine connection he's forged with Carly, a romance that's blossomed amid shared secrets and stolen glances. To sweeten her demand, Carly might even employ a bit of her signature manipulation, reminding him of their intimate evenings or the way she's opened up about her past heartbreaks, making it clear that Jocelyn's safety is non-negotiable. Yet, Brennan's response could be a wild card, given his deep-rooted dedication to his career. As the head of the WSB's local operations, he's accustomed to prioritizing missions over personal ties, often sacrificing relationships for the greater good, or at least what he perceives as such. Refusing Carly's plea might seem like the logical choice for a man who's climbed the ranks through ruthless decisions, but cracks could appear in his resolve. Suppose Jocelyn finds herself entangled in yet another hazardous scenario, defying Brennan's explicit orders in her impulsive quest for answers. This could involve her delving into the enigmatic world of Professor Henry Hank Dalton, a scholarly figure with a double life, perhaps tied to underground networks or forbidden research that spans from academic halls to shadowy labs. Dalton's lectures on ancient artifacts might hide clues to larger conspiracies, drawing Jocelyn in like a moth to a flame. If she pokes too deep, let's say, by infiltrating a private seminar or decoding encrypted Celeste, could trigger alarms, leading to a life-threatening pursuit through the university's dimly lit corridors, or even a trap set in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Complicating matters further is the simmering undercurrent of Jocelyn's emotions toward Vaughn, a charismatic operative whose path keeps crossing hers in the most clandestine ways. Their encounters, often in dimly lit safe houses or during high adrenaline debriefs, have sparked an undeniable chemistry, one that defies WSB protocols and personal boundaries. Vaughn, with his rugged charm and quick wit, might represent a forbidden thrill for Jocelyn, especially as she navigates her grief. But if their secret rendezvous, perhaps involving whispered confessions or stolen kisses amid stacks of classified documents, get exposed, it could provide Brennan with the perfect pretext to act. A leaked photo or an anonymous tip could force his hand, especially if Carly's pressure mounts. Firing Jocelyn under these circumstances might not only appease Carly, but also protect the agency's integrity, though it would leave Jocelyn reeling from the fallout, questioning her choices and alliances. As these threads converge, Brennan faces a crossroads that could redefine his future in Port Charles. The jaw-dropping revelation about Jocelyn's involvement is set to send shockwaves through their circle, testing loyalties and igniting new conflicts. Will he choose love over duty, or will his refusal deepen the rift with Carly?